The cantina on Nexus Station smelled like despair and cleaning fluid, which was an improvement over last week when it just smelled like despair. Zek Mortus slouched in the corner booth, all four arms crossed in what he liked to think was an intimidating display of boredom. His purple scales caught the flickering neon light, and his reputation preceded him like a bad smell. The galaxy's most feared assassin. Never missed a target. Never failed a job. Never had to wait more than 5 minutes for his handler to show up, but here we are. "You're late, Grim," Zek growled as a gelatinous blob squeezed itself into the opposite seat. The blob wore what could generously be called a suit, if you squinted and had never seen actual clothing before. Traffic was murder. Grim Belcher wheezed, his translator struggling with what passed for Galantian humor. "Get it? Murder? Because you're an assassin?" "I get it. I don't find it funny." Zek's secondary arms drummed impatiently on the table. "What's the job?" Nick. Grim oozed a data pad across the sticky surface. Simple elimination. One target. Backwater planet called Earth. Zek's interest perked up slightly. Earth jobs usually paid well because nobody wanted to travel to that cosmic joke of a planet. "What species?" "Human." The assassin's laugh was like rocks in a blender. "A human? You dragged me here for a soft skin extermination? I could sneeze and kill a human. That's what makes this so strange." Grim's blob form rippled with what might have been confusion. "The payment is 50,000 galactic credits." Now Zek was interested. 50,000 was genocide money, not single target elimination money. For one human. What did this meat sack do? Insult the Galactic Council's mother? Jake Murphy. Construction worker. Lives in a place called Chicago. No special skills listed, no military background, no political connections. Grim slid another pad across. Half now, half on completion. Zek studied the photo of his target. Jake Murphy looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for generic human male, version 2.0. Brown hair, average height, the kind of face that belonged on a milk carton for being so forgettable. He was smiling in the picture, which was weird. Most assassination targets had the good sense to look miserable in their photos. This is either the easiest money I've ever made, or someone's playing a joke that's about to get very expensive, Zek muttered, pocketing both data pads. "Fine. I'll take it. But if this human turns out to be some kind of super soldier experiment, I'm charging extra for ammunition. Just get it done, Zek. Clean and quiet. When am I ever anything but professional?" Zek stood, his impressive 7-foot frame casting shadows across half the bar. "I'll be back in 3 days with confirmation of termination." As he walked away, he missed Grim's worried expression. Well, what passed for worried when your face was essentially sentient pudding? The Galantian made a note in his personal log. Subject has accepted Earth assignment. May the universe have mercy on his soul. Zek, meanwhile, was already planning his approach. Humans were supposedly the weakest species in known space. No natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They couldn't even see properly in the dark or hear basic subsonic frequencies. It would be like stepping on an ant if ants paid 50,000 credits. He should have wondered why the payment was so high. He should have asked more questions. He should have done literally any research about humans beyond reading their species classification as harmless herbivores. But Zek Mortus was the galaxy's most feared assassin, and assassins don't get to the top by overthinking easy jobs. Earth was exactly as disappointing as Zek had expected. Blue, wet, and crawling with soft-skinned bipeds who somehow hadn't managed to destroy themselves yet. His ship's scanner had located Jake Murphy at a construction site in downtown Chicago, probably doing whatever it was humans did when they weren't being extinct. Zek's disguise was, in his professional opinion, flawless. He'd retracted his extra arms, dulled his scales to a sort of grayish green that definitely passed for human skin tone if you didn't look too closely, and wore what his research indicated was standard human attire, jeans and a t-shirt that read "World's Okayest Dad," which he'd stolen from a laundromat. The construction site buzzed with activity. Humans in hard hats moved around operating machinery that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard a vague description of advanced technology, but had to build it using spare parts from a junkyard. Zek spotted his target immediately. Jake Murphy was exactly as generic as his photo had suggested. Except for one thing, he was currently holding a steel beam that should have required a crane to lift, casually directing another worker on where to place it. Zek blinked all four eyes, then remembered he was supposed to only have two and felt grateful for his sunglasses. Must be some kind of mechanical assistance, Zek muttered, setting up his sniper rifle on a nearby rooftop. Probably magnetic boots or something. He lined up the shot. Perfect angle, clean line of sight, no witnesses. The plasma bolt would vaporize Jake Murphy before he even knew what hit him. Zek squeezed the trigger. Jake Murphy caught the plasma bolt out of the air, like someone had tossed him a baseball. The human examined the crackling energy in his palm with mild interest, then looked around until he spotted Zek on the rooftop. Instead of screaming or running or doing any of the normal things people do when someone tries to vaporize them, Jake Murphy waved cheerfully and called out, "Hey there. You dropped this." Then he threw the plasma bolt back. Zek dove behind an air conditioning unit as his own shot blew a hole through the roof where his head had been. When he cautiously peeked out, Jake Murphy was walking toward the building, still smiling like they were old friends meeting for lunch. "This has to be a mistake," Zek whispered to himself, checking his rifle for malfunctions. Plasma bolts don't just bounce off people. It's physically impossible. By the time Zek made it down to street level, Jake Murphy was waiting for him with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. "You look stressed, friend," Jake said, offering one of the cups. "Rough day?" "I know the feeling. Been trying to get this foundation level all morning, and the ground keeps shifting. Sometimes you just need to take a break and reassess your approach, you know." Zek stared at the coffee cup like it might explode. "You just caught a plasma bolt." "Oh, that little light thing?" "Yeah, seemed like you might need it back. Pretty dangerous leaving energy weapons lying around. Someone could get hurt." Jake took a sip of his coffee and made a satisfied sound. "Good thing I have quick reflexes. Comes from working construction. You develop good hand-eye coordination when your job involves catching things that fall from great heights. I was trying to kill you." "Were you now?" Jake's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Not anger, exactly. More like disappointment. "Well, that's not very neighborly. Mind if I ask why?" "It's my job. I'm an assassin. How's that working out for you?" Zek looked around. He was standing in broad daylight on a public street, holding an illegal energy weapon, talking to his target who had just casually deflected an assassination attempt and was now offering life advice. Not great, honestly. "Maybe we should talk this through over coffee? I know a place that makes excellent donuts. My treat." And that's how Zek Mortus, the galaxy's most feared assassin, found himself sitting in a Chicago coffee shop across from his target, wondering if he'd somehow fallen into an alternate dimension where physics worked differently and humans were something other than the weakest species in known space. "So," Jake said, dunking a glazed donut into his coffee, "tell me about yourself. What got you into the assassination business?" 3 days. 3 days of increasingly ridiculous assassination attempts, and Jake Murphy was still breathing, still smiling, and still treating Zek like a mildly confused tourist who needed directions. Day 1 had been the poison attempt. Zek had slipped enough concentrated vortex venom into Jake's lunch to kill a small elephant. Jake had eaten the entire sandwich, complimented the flavor, and asked for the recipe. Then he'd spent the afternoon building immunity to 17 different toxins, while explaining to Zek how his grandmother's secret ingredient had always been a little bit of everything. Day 2 had been explosives. Zek had rigged Jake's apartment building with enough plasma charges to level a city block. Jake had noticed the devices, thanked Zek for helping with the urban renewal project, and redirected the blast to clear a blocked sewer system that had been backing up for months. The city had given him a commendation. Day 3 had been hired muscle. Zek had paid a gang of Kronar mercenaries to rough up Jake Murphy, figuring if he couldn't kill the human directly, maybe someone else could. Jake had accidentally started a neighborhood watch program after the mercenaries decided they'd rather help him organize a block party than beat him up. "This is impossible," Zek muttered into his communicator as he watched Jake teach a group of alien thugs how to make proper barbecue sauce. Humans are supposed to be weak, fragile, harmless. Maybe you're losing your touch, Grimm's voice crackled through the device. It's one human, Zek. How hard can it be? He caught a plasma bolt, Grimm, with his bare hands. Then he threw it back. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, that's not possible. That's what I said. But I watched it happen. More silence. Maybe he's not entirely human? No, he's definitely human. I've run every scan I have. He's got standard human DNA, human physiology, human everything. He just happens to be completely immune to death. What Zek didn't mention was that Jake had been leaving care packages outside his hotel room. Sandwiches with notes like "You look hungry and hope your day gets better." There was something deeply unsettling about being assassinated by kindness. "Boss," a new voice interrupted. One of his contacts in the galactic underworld. "We got a problem." "What now?" "Word spreading that someone's hassling a human. The consortium's mobilizing. So are the Void Runners and the Crimson Fleet." Zek felt his blood run cold. "Mobilizing to help me?" Laughter. "Not the good kind." "Help you?" "Boss, they're mobilizing to stop you. Nobody messes with humans. That's like rule number 1 of galactic crime." The line went dead. Zek stared at his communicator, trying to process what he'd just heard. Since when were humans under galactic criminal protection? They were supposed to be the weakest species in known space. His contemplation was interrupted by a gentle knock on his hotel room door. "Hey, Zek." Jake's voice carried through the thin walls. "I brought soup. You looked like you were coming down with something earlier." Zek opened the door to find Jake Murphy standing in the hallway with a thermos and a genuinely concerned expression. "How did you know which room I was in?" asked the front desk. "Told them I was checking on a friend." Jake held out the thermos. "Chicken noodle. It's good for whatever ails you. You do realize I'm trying to kill you, right?" "Yeah, I figured. You're not very subtle." Jake's smile was impossibly patient. "But you seem like you're struggling with it, so I thought maybe you could use some soup and a friendly ear." Zek took the thermos because refusing seemed somehow more dangerous than accepting. "This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." "What doesn't make sense?" "You're human. Humans are weak. I should be able to kill you with my eyes closed." Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "Who told you humans were weak?" "Everyone. It's common knowledge. You're classified as harmless herbivores in every database I've ever accessed." For the first time since they'd met, Jake Murphy's smile faded completely. "Oh no. Someone's been lying to you, haven't they?" And that's when Zek Mortus realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his very long career. When you're the galaxy's most feared assassin, and you need to get serious about your job, you don't mess around with subtle approaches. You grab the target's weakness and squeeze until something breaks. For most species, that weakness was family, friends, or loved ones. So when Zek spotted Jake Murphy's elderly human neighbor tending her garden, he figured he'd finally found his leverage. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson was exactly what central casting would order for harmless Earth grandmother. White hair in a neat bun, floral dress, and the kind of smile that suggested she kept cookies in her purse for emergencies. She was currently knitting something pink and complicated while sitting on her front porch. "Excuse me," Zek said, having ditched his human disguise because subtlety was clearly not working. "I need you to come with me." Mrs. Patterson looked up from her knitting and examined Zek's forearms and purple scales with the same mild interest she might show a particularly unusual butterfly. "Oh my," she said pleasantly. "You're not from around here, are you, dear?" "I'm holding you hostage to draw out Jake Murphy." "Are you now?" "That's nice." She went back to her knitting. "Would you like some tea while we wait?" "I just put the kettle on." Zek blinked his 4 eyes in sequence. "I don't think you understand. I'm kidnapping you." "Yes, I heard. Very exciting." "I haven't been kidnapped since 1987, and that was just a misunderstanding with some very confused bank robbers." Mrs. Patterson's needles clicked steadily. "What's your name, dear?" "Zek Mortus." I'm an assassin. How interesting. I'm Eleanor, but everyone calls me Mrs. P. What got you into the assassination business? And somehow Zek found himself sitting on Mrs. Patterson's porch, drinking tea and explaining his career choices to a little old lady who seemed genuinely interested in his professional development. The thing about career satisfaction, Mrs. Patterson was saying, is that you have to find meaning in your work. Do you find your job fulfilling, Zek? I will, it pays well. But are you happy? Zek had never been asked that question before. In his line of work, happiness was generally considered a liability. I don't know. Maybe that's something to think about. Mrs. Patterson's smile was warm enough to melt titanium. Oh, hello, Jake, dear. Your friend Zek and I were just having a lovely chat about career goals. Jake Murphy appeared in the garden, as if he'd materialized from thin air, which, given everything else Zek had witnessed, was probably within the realm of possibility. Hey, Mrs. P, making new friends? Jake's tone was casual, but Zek noticed he positioned himself between the elderly woman and any potential escape routes. Oh yes, Zek here was just explaining how he's been trying to kill you. Such dedication to his craft. Jake sat down on the porch steps, apparently unconcerned that he was now within arm's reach of a hostage situation. Zek, we need to talk. About what? About why you really can't kill me. About why everyone in the galaxy told you humans were weak. About why the criminal underworld is mobilizing to stop you instead of help you. Zek set down his teacup. I'm listening. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out at Mrs. Patterson's roses. Tell me, Zek, in all your research about humans, did you ever wonder why we were quarantined to Earth? Quarantined? Meh. Oh yes, Mrs. Patterson said, not looking up from her knitting. We're not allowed to leave Earth without special permits. Haven't been for about 200 years now. Most humans don't even know about the rest of the galaxy. But why? Jake sighed. Because we kept accidentally solving everyone's problems. Do you know how many galactic wars we prevented just by suggesting people talk things out over coffee? How many trade disputes we've resolved by pointing out that everyone would benefit from cooperation instead of competition? That doesn't sound dangerous. It's not dangerous. It's terrifying. Jake's expression grew serious. Zek, what happens to the galactic balance of power when someone shows up who's genuinely good at bringing people together? What happens to the arms dealers, the mercenary companies, the assassination guilds when conflicts start getting resolved through conversation instead of violence? The pieces started falling into place. Someone hired me to test the quarantine. Someone hired you to see if humans were still contained. If I was just a normal construction worker who didn't know about the larger galaxy, you would have killed me easily. A mission accomplished, quarantine holding. But you're not normal. Jake's smile returned, but it was different now. Less friendly neighbor, more ancient predator pretending to be friendly neighbor. I keep busy on weekends. Mrs. Patterson finished her row and looked up. Jake here used to work for what you might call galactic peacekeeping, before the quarantine. Didn't you, dear? Retired, Jake said simply. But old habits die hard. Zek felt the universe tilt sideways. What are you? Just a human who believes in the radical idea that most problems can be solved if people are willing to listen to each other. Jake stood up, dusting off his jeans. The question is, Zek, who sent you here, and what are they really planning? The galactic enforcement ships appeared in Earth's atmosphere, like a swarm of angry wasps, their weapons trained on the small construction site where Zek had been hiding out. Apparently, breaching the human quarantine was the kind of offense that got you a personal visit from the galaxy's most humorless law enforcement agency. Attention, unauthorized alien presence. Boomed a voice from the lead ship. You are in violation of Galactic Treaty 4471b. Surrender immediately for processing and probable execution. Zek crouched behind a cement mixer, weighing his options. Option 1, surrender and face certain death for breaking the quarantine. Option 2, fight and face certain death from superior firepower. Option 3, hope that Jake Murphy's weirdness extended to dealing with military incursions. Hey Zek, Jake called out, seemingly unconcerned by the fleet of warships hovering overhead. You might want to get behind something more solid. Those enforcement boys never were great at precision targeting. The first volley of plasma cannon fire confirmed Jake's assessment. The cement mixer vaporized, along with most of the construction site's office trailer. Zek dove for cover behind a bulldozer, wondering how his simple assassination job had turned into a war zone. "This is all wrong," he muttered into his communicator. "Enforcement doesn't mobilize for single quarantine breaches. This is invasion-level response." Jake appeared next to him, as if he'd stepped out of thin air, carrying what looked like a modified plasma rifle that definitely hadn't come from Earth's technology tree. "Yeah, well, someone's been planning this for a while," Jake said, checking his weapon's charge. "The question is, are you going to help me figure out who, or are you going to keep trying to collect on that bounty?" "What bounty? I was hired to kill you, not capture you." "Check your account, Zek." Zek activated his portable banking terminal and felt his blood pressure spike. His account showed a new deposit of 2 million galactic credits with a note, "Bonus payment for live delivery," to coordinates attached. "Someone's been playing a very long game," Jake said, peering around the bulldozer at the circling ships. "They hire you to kill me, knowing you'll fail. Then they tip off enforcement about the quarantine breach, knowing they'll mobilize. Then they offer you enough money to make you desperate enough to try capturing me instead. But why?" "Mentoring." Jake's smile was grim. "Because they want me off Earth, alive and angry. Someone wants to weaponize human problem-solving abilities." The realization hit Zek like a brick to the face. "Counselor Vex, Dark Scale." "Come again?" "The only being in the galaxy with enough influence to mobilize enforcement and enough credits to make this kind of payoff." Zek's 4 hands clenched into fists. He's been planning to restart the Outer Rim conflicts. But he needs a way to neutralize human peacekeeping abilities. So he lures a human off Earth under combat conditions, proves we're not actually contained, and justifies a preemptive strike against the quarantine. Jake nodded approvingly. "Pretty clever, for a genocidal maniac." Another volley of plasma fire reminded them that clever genocidal maniacs were still dangerous genocidal maniacs. "I can get us out of here," Jake said. "But I need to know whose side you're on, Zek. Are you still hunting me for money, or are you ready to stop being someone else's pawn?" Zek looked at his account balance, then at Jake Murphy, then at the enforcement ships preparing to level downtown Chicago to capture one human. For the first time in his career, the choice between money and principle wasn't even close. "Screw the money," he said. "Let's go ruin Vex Darkscale's day." Jake's grin was the scariest thing Zek had ever seen, and he'd worked with some seriously unpleasant people. "Now you're talking my language." Counselor Vex Darkscale's flagship was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd named himself after the concept of darkness and reptilian skin. Black hull, intimidating weapon arrays, and enough Gothic architecture to make a cathedral jealous. It hung in Earth's upper atmosphere like a metal storm cloud, preparing to rain destruction on the planet below. "So," Zek said as their stolen enforcement shuttle approached the docking bay, "what's the plan?" Jake Murphy was doing something complicated with a tablet and what appeared to be blueprints for the ship they were about to infiltrate. "Well, originally I was thinking we'd sneak aboard, gather evidence of Vex's plan, and present it to the Galactic Council for proper legal proceedings. And now? Now I'm thinking we walk in the front door and ask nicely for him to stop." Zek stared at his unlikely partner. "That's your plan? Ask nicely? You'd be surprised how effective it can be." Jake pocketed the tablet and picked up a toolbox that definitely hadn't been standard issue on enforcement shuttles. People don't expect directness. They spend so much time planning for elaborate schemes that they never prepare for someone who just walks up and says what they want. The docking bay was crawling with mercenaries from a dozen different species, but all armed to the teeth and looking like they'd been hired specifically for their inability to engage in reasonable conversation. Jake walked past them carrying his toolbox, nodding politely to each group. "Afternoon," he said to a cluster of Kronar warriors. "Nice ship you've got here. Who's your contractor for the electrical work?" Said the lead Kronar, clearly not prepared for small talk. "Darkscale Industries?" "Good choice. They do solid work." Jake made a note in a small pad. "Mind if I take a look at your power distribution setup?" I'm always interested in different approaches to large-scale electrical systems. And that's how Jake Murphy, construction worker and retired galactic peacekeeper, has talked his way through an entire army of mercenaries by treating them like colleagues in the trades. This is insane, Zek whispered as they rode the elevator toward the command deck. This is human, Jake corrected. We tend to assume people are basically reasonable until proven otherwise. Most of the time, they are. The elevator doors opened to reveal Counselor Vek's dark scale in all his melodramatic glory. 8 feet tall, covered in actual dark scales and wearing a cape, because of course he was wearing a cape. He was surrounded by his personal guard and standing in front of a holographic display showing Earth's major population centers. Ah, Vek said, his voice like gravel in a blender. The famous Jake Murphy. Right on schedule. Counselor Dark Scale, Jake said pleasantly, setting down his toolbox. Nice to finally meet you. I have to say, this is one impressive ship you've got here. The energy management alone must be a nightmare to maintain. Vex blinked his reptilian eyes. What? The power systems. Running weapons, shields, life support, and propulsion for a ship this size? Your engineers must be absolute wizards. I'm Jake, by the way. I understand you've been trying to get my attention. Ah, yes, you're supposed to be angry, desperate, ready to be weaponized for galactic conquest. Jake looked genuinely confused. Why would I be angry? Your plan was pretty clever, honestly. Morally questionable, and ultimately doomed to failure. But clever. Doomed to failure? Oh yeah. See, the thing about humans is, we don't really do the whole being weaponized thing. We're more collaborative by nature. Jake opened his toolbox and pulled out what looked like a modified communicator. Which is why I spent the trip here calling in some favors. The main display flickered and changed to show incoming ships. Lots of them. From every major galactic faction, all broadcasting the same message: stand down immediately. This is a joint peacekeeping operation. You see, Jake continued, as if he was explaining a particularly simple home repair project. The thing about solving problems is that you end up making friends. And friends help each other out when someone's trying to restart galactic warfare for personal profit. Vex's personal guard was looking increasingly uncomfortable as more ships appeared on the display. This is impossible. The factions never cooperate. They do when someone takes the time to explain how cooperation benefits everyone involved. Jake's smile was absolutely genuine. Counselor, you've got 2 choices here. You can surrender peacefully and accept whatever legal consequences the Galactic Council decides on, or you can try to fight a combined fleet representing about 80% of known space. Vex Darkscale, genocidal mastermind and all-around bad guy, looked at his displays, looked at his nervous guards, and looked at Jake Murphy's patient expression. I surrender, he said, deflating like a punctured balloon. Excellent choice. Jake clapped his hands together. Now, who wants to help me figure out how to get this ship safely back to port? I've got some ideas about improving the efficiency of your engine systems. 6 months later, Zek Mortus was discovering that construction work was significantly more satisfying than assassination, especially when your business partner was Jake Murphy, and your first major contract was building a small defensive station for a client who insisted it was just for asteroid mining operations. Jake, Zek said, looking at the blueprints, this is a Death Star. Technically, it's a mining platform with defensive capabilities. It's a Death Star. It has a planet-killing laser. That's for clearing large asteroids. The client specifically requested that it be capable of destroying entire worlds. Jake looked up from his calculations. Okay, yes, it's a Death Star. But it's a nicely built Death Star, and the client promised they're only using it for intimidation purposes. Zek stared at his partner. You're building a Death Star because someone asked nicely? And because they offered to pay in advance, provide all materials, and throw in a comprehensive health insurance plan for our entire crew? Jake shrugged. Plus, have you seen the engineering challenges involved in this thing? This is fascinating work. Somewhere in the galaxy, Counselor Vex Darkscale was serving his sentence by working as a junior administrator for the Galactic Council's new conflict resolution department. It turned out that former villains made excellent case studies for understanding how disputes escalated to violence. and Mrs. Eleanor Patterson had won first place in the galactic knitting competition with a sweater that somehow incorporated fiber optic technology and anti-gravity yarn. But that's another story entirely. So Zek said, signing off on another section of Death Star blueprints. Any regrets about leaving the assassination business? Jake considered this while calculating load-bearing requirements for a planet killer laser. Well, the hours are better, the pay is steadier, and nobody's trying to have me killed anymore. Plus, I get to build cool stuff with my friends. Even when the cool stuff is technically a doomsday weapon, especially then. Do you have any idea how hard it is to make a laser this powerful actually work? This is engineering at its finest. And that's how the galaxy's most feared assassin learned that the real treasure was the friends he made along the way. Even if those friends insisted on treating weapons of mass destruction like particularly challenging home improvement projects. The universe, it turned out, was a much more interesting place when humans were involved.